Well, good day to you and welcome back. I'm down here by the banks of the Rio Grande in North Albuquerque, and I was thinking about the dilemma of writers. We sit in front of the glowy screen of the computer, or maybe in front of a typewriter, a blank sheet of paper or a blank screen staring us back in the face, and we have problems figuring out where to start, figuring out if we have enough creativity to really write, and maybe we have this idea that all the good stuff has already been written. Like, how many different unique pages are there? Haven't all the good stuff already been written and everything now being written is just derivative? These are all the kind of doubts that float through our minds as writers, as creatives, in those dark hours when we can't seem to make headway. That one sheet of paper. What are the options for that one sheet of paper? How many different unique individual sheets of writing are there? Stay tuned. This is a problem that a lot of writers have experienced, the face of the page staring back at them. But really, thinking about it, you have the option of 26 letters of the alphabet, let's say, spaces, and some punctuation, maybe periods and commas or whatever. And we basically choose between those, let's say, 29 symbols. And in the course of sequencing one symbol in front of the other, one letter in front of the other, interspersed with spaces and maybe punctuation, those letters begin to form words which become symbols in our minds for thoughts that we identify. And then the words fit together into sentences which then build more complex thoughts into our mind as we read them. And so really the question is, what can you do with one page? What are the possibilities of a single page of writing? All the books that have ever been written and ever will be written, they're essentially written one page at a time. So I'd like today to address this question of the uniqueness of our writing. How can we be unique writers? How can we write something original? Originality is the real problem when you're faced with almost unlimited media being produced. So let's look at a single sheet, a single page, one typed page, let's call it. Let's say it is US letter size for the sake of our thought experiment, but it could be any size page. Let's say we permit 1-inch borders, left, right, top, and bottom. Let's say we're using a 12 character per inch typewriter. It's a standard typewriter that does 6 lines per inch. How many characters can we type on that page? Well, let's see, 11-inch minus 2-inch borders is 9 times 6, that's 54 lines. Each line is 8.5 minus 2 inches is 6.5 inches times 12 characters per inch, that's 78. And so with 54 lines of text and 78 characters per line, we can write a total of 4,212 characters on that one page. To limit our thought experiment and make it a little bit easier to figure, let's say we're going to have 26 letters of the alphabet. Let's say uppercase only, just to make it simpler. We're going to permit also a space, a period, and a comma for punctuation. With those 29 symbols, and I'm counting a space as a symbol, we should be able to, or a writer should be able to, write just about any piece you can imagine and have a person read it and understand and get the gist of what the writer is saying. So that's 29 symbols, 4,212 of those symbols on one page. And so the question I asked myself was, given those parameters, how many unique pages are there? So as we think about this mental problem of how many unique pages are there, because we're trying to get a sense of, has all the good stuff been written already? But let's think a minute about this 4,212 character piece of paper. How many permutations are there? How many unique pages are there? Well, if you're into math, you probably already know the answer, but let's just break it down for you real simple like. Let's assume, for the sake of beginning this, let's assume you only have one character on the page, and let's say you have an alphabet of only 2 characters. So how many possible unique pages could you have? Well, that would be simple, 2. What about if you had now the same 2-letter alphabet, but 2 characters per page? Think about that. What are the permutations? 2 characters on the page, and it's a 2-letter alphabet. It turns out to be 2 times 2, which is 4 different unique pages. What about if we have 3 characters on the page and it's a 2-letter alphabet? Well, it ends up being 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8 different combinations, 8 different unique pages. So I think we can see a pattern now. The number of characters in your alphabet raised to the power of how many characters are on the page. And as it turns out with our thought experiment with this one typed page, so that's 29 to the 4,212th power. That's how many different unique pages there are with a 29 character alphabet. Well, that's interesting. It seems like a big number, but really, I don't really have a sense of how big that is. Part of the problem is because it's just numbers, and it's difficult to compare or to relate those numbers to something in the physical world, right? The other problem is it's a number, it's an exponential number, but it's not really represented in the standard scientific notation, which is like a small number between 1 and 10 times 10 to some power, some exponent, right? That's scientific notation. So what I had to figure out here is I had to convert this 29 to the 4,212th power. I had to convert it to standard scientific notation in order for me to understand how big this number was. And then I could compare it to bigger numbers that we already know relate to, like the scale of the universe and how small particles are and things like that. Well, it turned out to be a little more difficult than I thought, because you can't just go online and type what is 29 to the 4,212th power in scientific notation, because it breaks all of the online calculators, it turns out. So I have pages after pages of scribbled notes and corrections and, finding errors and going back and redoing things. But I finally came up with what I think is the right answer. And that is, there are 4.1722, to be precise, times 10 to the 6,159th power. That's how many unique pages it's possible to create using a 29 character alphabet and 4,212 characters on a page. So it's an enormous number. We still don't really understand maybe how big it is, but the key thing is here, it's not infinite. It's a very huge number, it's not infinite, and a dummy like me, working for a few days with pen and paper, figured it out. What I want to do now is to relate that number to large things in the universe, so we can get a sense of scale. How big is it? How many unique pages are there? Well, so what I wanted to do is to relate each of these unique pages to something really small. And I decided to use the subatomic particle called an electron. So I went looking up what's the size of an electron, and it turns out scientists really can't agree completely, but the average of their disagreement numbers is somewhere around 1 times 10 to the minus 20 meters radius. Okay, that's a ballpark. I can go with that. I don't claim to be a quantum physicist. Some physicists say it's about that size, so I went with it. Let's choose that. Okay, let's take the number of unique typewritten pages, let's take that many electrons, and let's cram them into a cube, right? Imagine a cube, right? And it has the number of unique pages in electrons crammed inside of it, and we will ignore the problems of like charges repel and all the physics of can you really cram that many charges into a space. for the sake of argument, for the sake of the math, let's make a cube. And how big is the cube? I'm going to look on my phone now, because I can't remember all these. So there are 4.17 times 10 to the 6,159 unique typewritten pages. And I'm going to represent each one the size of an electron, which is around 10 to the minus 20 meters. So I did a bunch of conversions, and I'm going to make a cube of electrons that's the same number of electrons as there are unique pages. And it turns out that the edge length, right, the length of one of those edges of the cube is 1.7 times 10 to the 2017th light years. That's 1.7 followed by 2017 zeros is the side length, the edge length of this cube of electrons that represents all the possible typewritten pages. And now the volume, how many cubic light years is that cube? It is 4.9 times 10 to the 6,051 power. Cubic light years, right? The distance that light travels in a year. That's pretty big. That's really big, in fact. So then I had to kind of stop and think, okay, that seems really big. I'm going to have to go and look up what is the size of the observable universe. Now, this is an interesting question because the general model, the current model, suggests it's about 14.8 or so billion years old, but because it's been expanding and there's been inflation in the expansion, they say that the size of the observable universe, all of it that we can see from Earth, is about 90 billion light years. And so the radius of the observable universe, the distance from Earth to the as far as we can see, is about 4.6 times 10 to the 13th light years. Think of a sphere that has a radius of 46 billion light years, right? So, what's the volume? The volume of the observable universe, right? Thinking it like it's a sphere, for instance, right? This is a very simplistic model, by the way. The volume is around 4.2 times 10 to the 39th cubic light years. Okay, that's the size of the observable universe. You know, this imaginary cube of electrons, each one representing a unique typed page, is much, much, much bigger in size and volume than the entire observable universe. In fact, it turns out to be that you could fit about 10 to the 6,012 universes into this imaginary cube of electrons that represent all the possible typed pages. That's a 1 followed by 6,012 zeros. That's the number of universes of our observable universe that you could fit into this cube. So really the question we should ask ourselves is, does it mean that all of the good writing has already been done? Think about all those possible pages that you could write. Every page that's ever been written is one of those unique pages. In theory, because we have a character set of 29 characters, including spaces, one of those pages will be all blank, another one will be all periods, another one will be all commas, another one will be just the letter A, another one will be just the letter B, all the way down through Z or Z. There will also be countless pages with readable text, recognizable text, and there might be countless pages with gibberish, but interspersed between the gibberish is recognizable words and phrases. But also, think about how language evolves over time. The language that we speak is not the same language that was spoken 300 years ago. Language is constantly evolving. Culture is constantly evolving. There are new acronyms and new terms coming out every day, every year. 20 years ago, people didn't talk the way they talk now. So maybe some of these pages that look like random letters that you couldn't pronounce phonetically, maybe those will end up 100 years from now being actual writing. Maybe there's a lot of acronyms that are used that we recognize, just like today, right? LOL and whatever, all the other acronyms we tend to take for granted. So to what looks like to us today like the random typings of monkeys sitting in front of typewriters might in the future end up being recognizable language that conveys meaning through symbology as language works. And so we have to consider all of these possible pages. This is one possibility. All those pages that seem to be nonsense might in the future actually have meaning. The future is open-ended, especially with creativity. You can't sit there and say, I don't know what to write, I don't know how to be creative, because the possibilities of creativity are literally bigger than the universe. One typed page, the total number of them, is so imaginably bigger than our universe that we can't even comprehend it, especially when we consider creative work and constantly evolving language. So let us not limit our horizons just to what is already being created, but let us look to the future, look up in the sky, look to the stars, think about how vast the universe is, and yet how much more vast are the possibilities of one typed page. 4,212 characters on a page. What are those possibilities? That's what you have sitting in front of you as you're sitting there staring at that blank piece of paper or at that glowing computer screen with a cursor blinking at you. We should not let this up here get in the way of what truly is almost infinite possibilities for creativity. And I hope this gives you some inspiration. And until next time, stay creative and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.